Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. I just loved your book. I
Oh,
laughed
thank you so
so
much.
much. Let's talk about when you started out doing this food column. I mean, you've said you're not a gourmet eater. What kind of food were you eating when you started doing this?
Yeah, I like to try all kinds of different foods. I'm very curious and open to new experiences, but I wouldn't describe myself as a foodie. I don't know that much about food or the food industry,
I've read that you've said that you could eat a full jar of olives.
and I often do. Yeah, I think that's a good snack, just a jar of black olives.
So, what made you want to take this on and really explore the world of food?
Well, it's such a big part of life. Like death, sex, work, food. It's just such a huge aspect. So when Lucky Peach asked me to start being a regular contributor, I was like, okay, I can really explore the outer edges of what's even tangentially related to food.
Hmm. You've also said that part of and this sounds like a stretch, but I know you'll explain this because you said that part of your reason for doing a food column was that you had agoraphobia. And the column
Yeah.
kind of helped you deal with your fear of going out in public. Explain that.
Yeah, well, I kind of, when I took on this sort of journalistic role, it helped me get out the door because I had to for my job. So even though, normally I'd be quite shy to go and shadow a professional chef and interview him for a full day, because it was my job, it helped me slide into that role easily and just kind of deal with whatever anxiety came with that.
And does being a cartoonist in particular, does that give you something else to kind of I don't want to say hide behind, but a hat to put on that protects the shy or anxious part of you from whatever's coming because you have a creative task
I suppose so,
with which
yeah.
to approach it?
Yeah. And also, I guess cartoonists aren't known for being the most outgoing people. So if I am feeling shy, I can definitely use
Gives
that
you
as
a
an
bye.
excuse. Yeah.
But so what did you learn? I mean, food is such a social experience for most people.
Yeah.
What did you learn about that by writing your column?
I think that, it's sort of an endless topic to explore. There's no end to what people can do with food and what people's thoughts about it can be. And yeah, I feel like I could make a whole second book about that.
What do you mean?
Um,
What more would you tackle in a second book?
oh, that's a good question. Um, I just, like I have a whole section of the book that's just about breakfast, and it's just me riffing on what it's almost like word association, like what comes to mind when I think of breakfast. And I could do the same thing for any category.
Hmm.
I could take dessert and do the same thing. So yeah, but there's only so much stuff you want to put in one book.
And the way that we use food as a means of gathering or as a means of
Yeah.
showing off. I mean, there's so many ways that we use food as with a social
Yeah,
function.
for me, I really associate it with family too. Like, there's a part of my book where I travel to Argentina, where my mom is from, and a lot of my relatives still live. And it ends with this sort of family barbecue scene. And I say, I feel safe here. And it's because, I feel safe with my family. And I think, whoever your family is, that's who you feel safest, like sharing a meal with, whether they're biologically related or not.
Hmm. When you draw food in this book, I mean, and I should say the whole tone of the book to me was so colorful and playful
Yes.
and random. I mean, it's surprising and funny. And sometimes, I would just sit and look at a page because it was so aesthetically pleasing. It was just
Oh,
so
thank you.
pretty and beautiful. Sometimes not so much,
Yeah.
not so appetizing. So, what was the aesthetic that you were aiming for?
I like to kind of have that push and pull between what's beautiful and what's disgusting. And either way, I want it to be something that draws the eye. And, food can be equally appetizing and disgusting. Like, it's very, there's a lot of fluids going on and different textures, and they're often difficult to illustrate. So sometimes, if I'm just drawing a runny egg, I'm not going to be able to properly capture what that looks like. So I might as well push how gross that is.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You're also really have a fascination with animals.
Yes.
Some people might know your work through the Netflix cartoon series BoJack Horseman.
Yes.
You are the artistic director, I
Yeah, the
believe, of
production
that. The
designer.
production
hmm
designer. So obviously, animals really showing up in your work there. I have to ask you about how you reconcile. You obviously have a love of animals. I've heard you talk a lot about your love of horses in particular, but How do you reconcile your love of animals with the fact that they make up a lot of the food that we eat?
That's a good question. And I think that's not something I want to reconcile. I always kind of want to think about it when I'm eating an animal and whether I really should be eating it, whether I really need that for my body at that moment. I do try to eat vegan as much as possible, but I also do eat a lot of meat. And that's just something I have to reckon with. I don't think it's great that I do that.
Do you stop and think about why you do that, though?
Yeah, sometimes.
And what's the answer?
I mean, sometimes it literally is like I'm anemic. Like I need a steak right now
Right.
to feel my best, and I'm being selfish, but that's something I have to deal with.
You love horses so much. Just
Yeah,
speaking of your love of animals, you when you were a kid, you wanted to marry a horse,
yeah.
and I
When you're a kid, you're just like, well, people marry what they love most, so yeah, why not? Why
I
isn't that okay?
I also loved a little. I think it was in a speech I saw you giving where you showed up a slide where you'd written a love letter to horses basically as a kid, and
Yeah,
at the end you said, "I want to grow up and be famous for drawing horses." So
yeah.
nicely done.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it worked out.
Part of this book is sort of you as an outsider looking at the world of foodies, if we haven't made that clear yet in the description of it. How do you feel about people who have a more serious relation or a earnestly serious relationship with we all have a serious and critical relationship with food
Yeah.
obviously, but people who take their relationship with food seriously, maybe I should put it that way.
Well, I have to say that while that culture could be seen as very snooty and sort of elitist, and it's very easy to write it off as that, I respect anyone who knows a lot about something. And especially with something as detailed as food and as varied as food, the more you know about it, the more you can experience. The more you can start to detect the differences between, different kinds of cheese and, an aged manchego versus a fresh one. There's just endless amounts of information to learn.
So you can, on the one hand, sort of skewer that and find that a little bit
Yeah, I mean, it can
mockable.
be quite pompous at times, and a lot of restaurant culture is very elitist and it's about spending lots of money and it can be kind of boring. But, behind all of that, there are experts and there are really talented chefs, and that's amazing to witness.
In the book, you tell a story of the day that you spent with Wylie Dufresne, who's a famous chef in
Yeah.
New York, and he makes what you call intellectually stimulating food, which I first of all have to ask you what that even means.
Well, he's really playful with the food. I mean, not only does it taste good, but I feel like with every dish he was serving, there was a little bit of a joke in there.
Like, give me an
There was
example.
something where it was like peas and carrots, but the carrots were actually like pulverized peas dusted with carrot dust. So it was just sort of like there was so many layers in that, and it was hilarious. And for me, like I relate to that because that's a bit of the same approach I have to drawing.
Explain that connection. What do you
Well,
mean?
I like visual gags. I like puns. I like it when there's another layer to something or there's a hidden image somewhere.
Hmm.
I like to hide things in the background when I'm designing things for Bojack. I like things that make you take a second glance.
So when you were with Wiley, you asked him if it was worthwhile to make this intellectual food when a lot of people come to the restaurant and just want a steak. What did
Yeah.
he say about that?
Um, yeah, I mean, he nodded and he was like, "Yeah, I mean, you get bad Yelp reviews sometimes from people who just don't get it. But also, you can't blame people for sometimes just wanting like a good, simple meal that they understand. Like, we all have to eat 3 meals a day at least, so sometimes you don't want your food to be like a complicated joke."
And for him, the exercise was still worth it regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, he's an artist. He's someone who follows his interests.
Hmm.
He doesn't want to just cook a steak.
One of the things I love in this book that you point out about him is while this, renowned chef was cooking, the whole time he's eating cheese slices.
Yeah.
What do you read into that?
Well, he had a very, good feel for what just tastes good to him. And he doesn't care whether it's like a fancy thing or not. which to me was, just so great. Like, he cooked us breakfast when I first showed up, and it was just eggs with American cheese. And it was delicious. I was like, oh, yeah, this does taste good. I haven't eaten this since I was a little kid, but it's great.
Did you see that in other chefs? I mean, did you notice anything as in terms of a pattern? The relationships that, let's call them fancy chefs,
Yeah.
can have with food?
I think it's a little bit of a trend right now, and I think part of that was sort of started by David Chang, who created Lucky Peach magazine. Yeah, he knows that like ramen noodles are great, and you can do a lot with them. I think he, at one point he like pulverized them and created gnocchi out of ramen. So his food is like a very playful mix of high and low, and it's very accessible in that way.
What are some of the other weirder combinations in all your explorations in the world of fancy food? What are some of the weirder combinations you've come across?
Let's see. I mean, I think, Wylie's food is probably the most interesting and weird food that I've had. One food that I'm really into right now is Szechuan food. I just really like Szechuan peppercorns. I mean, I don't think that that's like a weird thing. It's just something that's new to me. And I just like how it's a different kind of spice. Like, it's not like a hot spice, it's a tingly spice. So yeah, I really love that.
You have a great appreciation of food.
Yeah.
And has some of that come from spending a lot of time with foodies? Because I mean, as you said, it can seem pompous and ridiculous to a lot of people outside that set. The price of a carrot that's actually pea dust or whatever.
Yeah.
You respect that though on a certain level.
Yeah, I mean, anything can seem pompous if it's something that's not accessible to you. Like, the art world can seem incredibly pompous, but if you actually listen to someone who knows what they're talking about and can explain a painting to you, it's amazing, and you can really see more. And I feel the same way about food. I've had the opportunity to have dinner with, editors at Lucky Peach and food critics who I love and have been reading for years, like Jonathan Gold, I got to meet, and I could just listen to him talk about food forever and explain his opinions. We ordered like cow's brains at a restaurant. He was like, "You can try it first, and then I'll tell you what I think about brains."
And what did he tell you? What he thinks about brains?
I think he thought it was like sort of risky to eat them, and he kind of agreed with that. But also, it's one of those things where if you have the opportunity to try it, you shouldn't turn it down.
Risky in a mad cow kind of way?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. It's not the safest food to eat.
How has writing this column overall, changed, and the book together, changed the way that you think about food?
I guess it's made me even more open to trying different things.
Clearly, with the cow's brains.
Yeah. I didn't love them, but I did try them. I hate oysters, for example. I really just don't like them. But I've tried them now like 5-6 times because at least, it's an interesting experience, forcing yourself to try something you're not sure you'll like.
And you've certainly gotten into so many aspects of food in a different way, having to create illustrations and humorous interpretations of them too.
Yeah.
So good to have you here. And again, I really enjoyed the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.